What we see online is not sometimes the reality. With social media, we need to obviously be able to manage the opportunities and the risks.
One social media platform that young people are spending so much time on but should actually give up.
So I actually have two. I think the first one...
How do young people stay truthful, stay faithful in a digital space that tells you that your truth is the truth?
I think the first one is obviously...
And you know, social media, what's so dangerous about it as well is it... Okay. Are we doing fine? Is that...
Okay.
Kurula, Uktula, Muraro, Khozo. Welcome to today's podcast on social media, the subjective truth. Today, to help us unpack this, I've got Lerato Ntwampe, who is an admitted attorney who specializes in social media law and online behavior. Thank you for joining us today, Lerato.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So before we get into the nitty-gritties and the deeper conversations, can you please just tell us about that one social media platform that young people are spending so much time on but should actually give up?
So I actually have two. I think the first one is TikTok. I think TikTok is, a very popular app, and unfortunately, some of, the algorithm and some of the feeds can really, really impact on, how you portray it yourself, and as well as, some of the influence that comes from TikTok. A lot of the things that we buy, we don't necessarily need, but because we saw it on TikTok, we think it's valid. And I think also, because of all the influencers and all the experts that we find on TikTok, sometimes we rely way too much on it without actually even interrogating some of that content. So I think it can be harmful in that way. So that would definitely have to go. And also, obviously, young people are very addicted to it because of the algorithm, how it works. It's quite a sophisticated and impressive algorithm, but unfortunately it does, cause that harm, especially for young people. And then the second one, definitely WhatsApp.
Hi, boo.
WhatsApp needs to go. I think, WhatsApp is one of those apps that, it creates a lot of pressure because, there's this culture of urgency and there's this culture of having to respond without actually taking the time to reflect on the messages that you've received. And I think sometimes that can create a lot of pressure, for young people and even, young professionals and even adults, because, you have to respond without reflecting, and then that can cause so much anxiety. Then you're overwhelmed. And because it's one of those apps that you can't log off of, it makes it quite difficult to sort of navigate. So you need to have very strong boundaries. And unfortunately, you have to disappoint some people. And I think it needs to go.
I'm just thinking about WhatsApp. There's no log off, no sign out. So you're always in, and you can't even switch off notifications. It comes in as you want it and as it pleases. So I sort of do understand, but we do need WhatsApp. It makes life easy.
But also, I think with WhatsApp, what's the problem with it is that it's one of those things that when somebody has your number, like they're already sort of part of your space, part of your life, and sometimes maybe you don't want them to see that part. So unless you know how to navigate, privacy settings, it can be quite difficult and daunting. Because unfortunately, WhatsApp is everywhere. There's a church WhatsApp group, there's a family WhatsApp group, there's a work group.
There's that baby shower WhatsApp
There's a
group.
baby shower WhatsApp group. So it can become a bit overwhelming, I think, because it's one of those where if you have your phone with you, it will definitely ping. And it's a WhatsApp. And people even have, this anxiety thing. And the younger generation, they don't like calls. Like, why don't you WhatsApp me first? And I think sometimes, that sort of thing can sort of impact your social skills, because why can't you take a call? Like, how are you going to navigate the workspace if you just constantly think you want to text and you actually don't want to speak to people on WhatsApp, and those things are created because you're reachable. You're reachable. So
Well, I hear you, and I think if we sort of shift the conversation, we're talking about those platforms that young people should get out from, but if we're being honest, there are some opportunities that come from social media. You know, when Facebook came in, it was helping us to connect with people that we hadn't seen in ages. Then we've got your LinkedIn's, which is a more professional network. So there are positives and there are opportunities that we get from social media, but they do pose a risk. And how do we then navigate balancing the two?
I think social media and AI, give us an incredible, there are incredible tools, that can obviously help us connect. They can help us, share our creativity. And, essentially, there are opportunities that exist that didn't exist before. There are content creators and influencers now who are able to actually, have a whole job and they can make an income from what they contribute to social media. I don't even think I would have a job without social media because of unfortunately the online harms that exist, but also the opportunities. But I think, with social media, we need to obviously be able to manage the opportunities and the risks, using wisdom and discernment, because unfortunately some of the things that can happen on social media are really quite harmful. I mean, if you think about, this trending challenge where people are basically posting pictures, either hugging a celebrity, and that never happened. But because of, the editing tools that are so sophisticated, it makes it look so realistic. But you think of some of the online harms and the dangers that obviously come from that. I work predominantly a lot with schools, as well as in the work, in the legal space, and sometimes those tools are actually used to harm other people, and that could be defamatory, or it could be people using it for explicit content, and they manipulate the images to basically portray something that never happened. So, and because a lot of people still need digital literacy and training on how these things act and whether something is real or not real, it can sometimes pose, challenges for, especially in relationships, where if now, a picture is circulating and now you're hugging a strange woman who's not your wife,
you're in trouble.
You're in trouble. And obviously even the chatbots, there's a recent case in the US where, a family is actually suing OpenAI because their son, died by suicide. And I think, once he passed away, they were able to actually check his phone, and they actually found that this kid was actually having conversations with this chatbot, and essentially this chatbot was encouraging him to commit suicide, and it actually even offered to write his suicide note, and those are the extreme cases. So we need to obviously apply discernment and wisdom, and ensure that we actually protect our children as well, when it comes to things like these opportunities that artificial intelligence and social media present. There are obviously other online harms, but I don't think we have all the time to get into those.
No, for sure. And I'm just thinking, AI and social media have opened opportunities where you're able, young people in varsity and schools are writing essays now using chatbots, AI, there are deep fakes that the young people are getting into. What are those ethical challenges that young people need to be aware of when accessing and using AI and social media?
Sure. I think, one of the ethical challenges that exists, I mean, there's quite a few. I think the first being over-reliance on AI. I think, young people are relying way too much on AI. And that can impact, time management. It can impact critical skills because essentially if you have a deadline, you're like, oh no, ChatGPT's got me. So I'll just, use AI. And then there's other challenges, obviously like bias. And discrimination. Unfortunately, these, machine learning and these artificial intelligent tools are actually trained by specific data. And sometimes that data, can be very prejudiced towards certain groups. So if you're just going to take AI, as what it says, you might, sort of lose an identity or have a certain perception on how a certain group behaves because of how it has been trained. So that bias, we definitely need to look that into. And then also another thing, we need to recognize that AI can lie. AI hallucinates, and it can confidently give you answers to a question that, and it could be completely wrong. So I think, as young people, we need to be able to interrogate it, fact check, just because if you're just going to rely blanketly on AI, you might, find yourself either disseminating misinformation, disinformation, false things that have never happened because of the AI, hallucinating. And then I think another one, obviously, if you rely too much on AI, it will affect, how you critically engage with certain information. So I think relying way too much on it can prove to be quite difficult in terms of how you're going to critically analyze certain information.
That is quite dangerous. I'm just thinking in my time, and I'm not trying to reveal my age here, but in my time, you'd have libraries where you'd have to go through an encyclopedia just to get information, and you'd need to go through several books before you get your answer. And like you said, now we just know, I can just quickly chat GPT. It can give you literally an essay in less than a minute. We know of pastors as well that are, getting their sermons from ChatGPT. It'll send you a prayer. It'll even give you verses. So it is quite dangerous that we get to a point where we sort of rely on social media and AI to give us the information that honestly we can get, in other places, and actually use critical thinking to get the answers to those things. So that's a great point. And I hope the students are listening, that, you shouldn't be using the AI to sort of get to that.
Also, just to add, I think there are also, obviously privacy and confidential concerns. So imagine if you're like working with certain people. So if you're going to be, putting it up on AI, putting their details, I mean, that can compromise, their privacy, their dignity. And sometimes, we need to not forget the Ubuntu and the human experience, the human element. You can't get that from AI, unfortunately, and we've seen that over and over. So I think also we need to be mindful in terms of what we put in the AI tools, because we shouldn't compromise people's personal information. We need to keep it as confidential as possible.
That's quite scary. And I mean, it takes me to my next point, which is about algorithm, right? So, that social media feeds us what we want to see. I'll watch that one video on social media and it'll bring me dozens of videos after that. And what I see on my feed is not going to be the same as what you see, which is very dangerous and it's quite concerning. And my thing is, I want you to just sort of school us on how that could really shape people's realities. Because what I'm seeing on my social media is not what you're seeing on your social media. And it goes back to what you said, that AI is prejudice. It will come with what it has been fed, and it will feed that to you and our young children. So what do you think is something that we need to be aware of in terms of that?
I think it's quite a dangerous thing, and I think we've seen it especially in the political landscape, where there's certain news that trend online, specifically on specific social media platforms. I don't want to name anyone, but and that can really change. I think we saw it in the US, how using social media literally switched the election outcomes, and because certain people, they were driven to support a specific party just based on the algorithm. So I think in terms of a political landscape, if you keep seeing the same content over and over, it can really affect, how you perceive certain things. And I think it can really impact on how, you sort of relate. If you're not represented, for example, that can have serious impact. If you're getting content about self-harm all the time, that can have devastating effects on you, if you're getting, content about buying certain things, and it's all these hauls, pushing you to buy a specific content, or to buy specific products, even if you didn't even need them, but because the algorithm is pushing certain content, it can be quite dangerous. And we're seeing obviously that there's a lot of over sexualized content as well that is actually in the algorithms, and that could also be dangerous in terms of how you actually have specific body dysmorphia, or you want to look a certain way because of the certain filters that you also use, the beauty filters, and you think, oh, maybe I need to change my nose, or oh, maybe because I look prettier if I have a beauty filter. So I think there's a lot of elements in terms of how the algorithms can really shape society and shape your identity, especially if you're too reliant on that feed.
Yeah, that is quite scary. That is quite scary. And I just thought of something now as well in terms of how social media, the clips are so short. So you don't even need to sit down, like, movies or anything could be longer, literally 30 seconds, and you've got all that algorithm or all that information fed to you through that short video, through that short clip. And that brings me to my next one, because you see now the social media that we have and the different platforms that we have, everything is curated. I woke up like this, makeups, and talking about how people are now so conscious about their body, how they look because of these curated highlights on social media. What are the dangers about that that we are not aware of, where we are looking at something that people create and want us to see a certain image, but it's actually not genuine. It's actually not true.
Yeah, I think that is a huge problem, and I think it's quite a challenge for young people, because I think at the end of the day, we don't realize that people only share their highlight reels. Like, I'm only going to show you when I'm doing well. Like when I'm working towards a goal, you're not going to see the behind the scenes. So I think sometimes that creates a very unrealistic expectation that, okay, like, why is Lufuno getting married? Why is Lufuno is having another baby? That can create so much envy and unrealistic expectations of yourself. And that can also shape your identity, because you're not sitting in the season that you're in and appreciating what God is probably doing in your life, because now you're looking at someone else and thinking, why is she in her season? Like, when is it going to come? And that can obviously bring feelings of resentment, feelings of feeling that you're not adequate, and I think that's a huge challenge, because unfortunately no one is going to tell you that, oh, I suffered, to
they
get to this point.
They won't tell you the bad stuff.
They won't, So if you're just looking at somebody's curated feed, without the knowledge that, oh my God, this person probably took out a loan to be on this holiday, or this person is probably in debt. I think we also need to think about those things, because what we see online is not sometimes the reality. And I think sometimes we just need to be aware of that, so that we're able to sort of mitigate some of those feelings of resentment and envy, looking at other people's lives. And sometimes, we have different seasons. You just need to accept the season that you're in and learn from it, and I think it is important, for you, to be able to distinguish yourself from what you're seeing online, and distinguish it from where you are in terms of your journey. And it can be hard. It was hard, I mean, from my personal experience, I've experienced it as well, where how I felt like, oh, okay, even if I've done amazing, but I'm like, oh geez, so and so has done this, like, when is it going to be my turn? But I had to sort of condition myself to be able to audit my social media, to if something was making me feel uncomfortable, I know that, okay, maybe I need to maybe unfollow this person, or maybe I need to take a digital detox for a bit, just to understand why I'm having these feelings. And I think those sort of things can assist you in mitigating.
I'm just going to pick up from what you said, in terms of taking a digital detox. Social media has created this thing where, we've got the fear of missing out. I compare myself with the people that I see on my social media. And, I sort of have anxiety. Like, am I showing up in the best way? Because this person is showing up in this way that I'm seeing on social media. What are those tips that you would give young people in terms of how to balance that?
Okay, so I think firstly you need to recognize that you obviously have a problem. In terms of, social media making you feel a certain way. I think that's the first step, recognizing that, okay, maybe, I'm seeking validation from my followers. Maybe, the likes are making me feel worthy, are making me feel important.
Yeah.
And, I feel like, because social media has this thing. Obviously, the more likes, it's an economy of likes. The more likes you get, the better you feel about yourself. And I think if sometimes you put too much value in that, you can lose yourself, because then you start doing things to make you trend, to make you go viral. And sometimes those things might not be godly. Sometimes those things, could, be compromising who you are, compromising the values that you have. So I think by recognizing that, okay, I feel why am I feeling like this? I think that's the first thing, that you need to recognize that you actually have a problem. Maybe, I'm spending too much time on social media. Maybe I want to check notifications and I'm at a service, or I'm spending too much time, and it's affecting the relationships, because unfortunately sometimes, you zone out and somebody has to repeat what did you say again, because they were on their phone. So I think once you recognize that's a problem, that's the first step. The second step is obviously auditing your social media. So if you are on social media, you need to do an audit, and by auditing it, it's basically monitoring what you're consuming. So if, for example, you're following people that they're always on holiday,
really,
literally, they are just jet setters. They were here. They just passport gang, and that's making you feel some type of way. You need to audit that. Or maybe if you're following people that are constantly having a baby or getting married, and that makes you feel sad because you're still single or you're still trying to look, you can use the privacy settings. You can use some of the settings that exist. You can mute, you can block. I like to say that there's certain words that you can sort of block. I remember when I was, in university and everyone was graduating, and I had changed from education to law.
Yeah.
And obviously that meant that I had to spend and now people are graduating and I'm feeling some type of way. I'm like, maybe graduations, I need to mute.
Yeah.
So you can do a social media audit by that. And then the third one is creating an better online experience for yourself. So I always like to say, unfollow what no longer inspires you. So if you're feeling that I didn't like seeing that, maybe you need to unfollow. Because that having those feelings of maybe feeling like you're jealous or envious of somebody, you can essentially just unfollow them, and that you're creating a better online experience for yourself. So if, for example, you've got an algorithm that's saying, you need to do certain things. I know with certain applications, you are able to reset it.
Yeah.
You can reset your algorithm. So you do that. That's also, creating a better experience for yourself. And then lastly, it's modeling good behavior. I think so many of us don't model good behavior when it comes to social media. I think remember the values, that you have, when you are offline. So don't try to be someone else just because you're online. Double edging. You need to remember who you are. And also remember that the internet never forgets.
Oh, we've seen that.
The internet, unfortunately, never forgets.
Yeah.
And, when you are creating certain content or you're posting on social media, you're basically creating something that we call a digital footprint. And a digital footprint is a digital CV about you. So before I've even met Lufuno, if I can find you on LinkedIn or I can find you on Facebook, I see the tweets, or I'm reading the post that you're making, I can sort of form an opinion about who you are. And sometimes, we forget that, your digital footprint is basically how you basically represent yourself online. So sometimes we find ourselves where, you're like, oh, Lufuno is such a good person, or maybe Lufuno's posts, are maybe racist or homophobic, or they just have some sort of thing, and it puts me off. And maybe Lufuno is no longer like that. But now I miss out on an opportunity because of what I've. So remember your digital footprint, and curate content that you're proud of. Like, be proud of, if somebody is going to be looking at your feed, they should be feeling inspired. By it. And obviously this, hashtag will delete later. It doesn't
to be
work.
deleted.
It's not going to work. So that's quite important.
Yeah.
And I think also, being aware of people around you and creating phone-free zones. So I think when you do that, you're actually able to have better relationships with people. If you, constantly always on your phone, and people can't really sort of like speak to you. They don't know how to sort of, relate to you because you're just always on your phone. It can be quite detrimental to your relationship. So I think that's quite important. And then I think the last one is think before you post. So I always like to use think before you post as an acronym, and it's basically 5 questions that you need to answer. You have to basically ask yourself if before you post something, before you comment on something, before you share something. So ask yourself 5 questions. Is it true? Is it harmful? Is it illegal? Is it necessary? And is it kind? Because I think, once you can answer those questions, sometimes it can guide you. Like, because, and it can sometimes save you. I think in my space, in my field of work, I see a lot of things. I see a lot of challenges and people who probably they didn't think. They didn't ask themselves those questions, and now they find themselves in very, very situations that they can't get out of, or situations that become embarrassing for them, or situations that cost them their jobs, and unfortunately that is the reality because of social media. So remember that even your digital footprint, like, anybody can get a hold of it. Your employer can get a hold of your digital footprint, and they can see that, oh, okay, this is the type of person, and they can say, well, we don't really align ourselves with this person. Like, how, I don't think they're good. And there goes the opportunity based on content that you've probably posted when you were young and still wet behind the ears, and you didn't actually think that there were real life consequences about what you were doing. So I think those are the things that I can basically share in terms of how you can create a better online experience for yourself, and just to recognize how you can basically treat others better, and also be responsible for the content that you post.
Those are very good tips. I'm just thinking about also how social media has taken that human connection, as you've mentioned, how we spend so much time on our phones, where we're losing the human connection. Each time you go on a date, or it could be an event, you are always on your phone. We see people at church even, you were just talking about it, where you just want to quickly check that notification. You take away from actually being present with the people around you. And something I'm very curious for us to talk about, as young people, and as young people in the church that are exposed to social media. And, social media tells you to be in your field, they tell you the truth that is your truth, but the only truth that we believe in is God's truth. How do young people stay truthful, stay faithful in a digital space that tells you that your truth is the truth?
Sure. I think the first one is obviously discernment. I think you just need to practice discernment and be wise. And I think, ask yourself, have a motive. Why am I posting certain things? Like, I'm at church, there's now Holy Communion. Like, do I post this? Like, what value, is that going to evaluate your decision in terms of why am I doing this? Am I doing this because, I want people to like me? Am I doing this because I want likes? Am I doing this because it feels I want to hold on to this memory? Because I think sometimes we lose out on things that are meant to be sacred, things that are meant to help you reflect. And because of the hype, we've normalized this hype, the gram. Like if it's not on the gram, it didn't happen. I think those sort of things, can really, really affect how you sort of move in the world, and you can sort of lose yourself in that, because you're like, oh, certain content, I posted a Bible verse, and I got a lot of likes. Maybe I need to keep it going. And maybe you didn't even read it. You have no context. And I think sometimes people lose themselves in that, because they think, oh, okay, this is getting likes. Let me keep at it. And sometimes you create this expectation that now I meet you in person and I'm like, oh, girl, let's go a bit deeper on that verse. Like, let's see, where were you going with it? So, and I think that can be quite unfortunate when, the online persona doesn't meet the real life
what person. I ordered versus what I got.
Exactly. And I think that can navigate in a lot of things where, we spoke about AI, where maybe you're employed because, wow, your motivational letter.
You got it. AI did the thing.
Now it's time to perform. And it's not happening. And I think there's so many scenarios where we can actually, even in dating, where if you're online dating, somebody has presented, this, thing.
Tall, dark, handsome.
And or they've created this illusion because they've probably stalked your social media. And that goes back also to your digital footprint, where I've stalked you. I know exactly what you're looking for. I'm going to present that to you. That's not a real person.
Sure. Catfishing.
So even your digital footprint can go to those extremes where you are now scammed because you've basically put out all the things that you find or you want in a partner, or there's certain things, a dream date, certain things that maybe you could have kept to yourself, and now there's this person who's offering you exactly what you wanted, but they're not the real person because they've probably found that from online, from your Facebook page. You told them. And now they present, and then you're shocked that, oh, I was scammed. So I think those are certain things as well that you sort of have to look out for.
Yeah. What you shared is quite insightful, but I want us to take us back to some of the online harms that you sort of touched on. And I want us to just sort of unpack it further. We are aware of young people being addicted to pornography, which is easily accessible right now online. Social media even, do show snippets of pornography. But also something which is quite interesting is how pastors are now taking their sermons from AI.
Sure.
And, you just said that AI is a liar, it hallucinates. But there are some pastors that are able to create their sermons and prayers based on what they get on AI. Can you touch on that a little bit and just talk about the harms of that?
Okay, so I think I'll start with the online harms. Obviously, there's quite a lot of online harms, and I think in the Christian community, I think we're seeing more and more people being addicted to pornography because of how online pornography is just so easily available. And I think we're seeing quite a huge impact, especially on our young girls and our young boys, and how pornography is actually affecting them. I think in 2022, there was a study that came out from UNICEF's, I think it was, I can't remember the bureau that actually came up with this, but they actually reported that, in South Africa, a child as young as 5 years old is addicted to pornography. And they're addicted to pornography because obviously they have access. We give them tablets, we give them smartphones, and unfortunately we give them without putting, the necessary firewalls or the necessary parental controls that actually protect them from seeing, premature content. And I think pornography is one of those things where it can really, really affect how a person, perceives relationships, how they sort of thrive in relationships. I think for young boys, it can give a perception. It can normalize harmful attitudes where, you think that, sexual intimacy needs to be brutal. It needs to be violent. It needs to be degrading, because unfortunately the pornography that is being seen online is hardcore. It's not the soft pornography that existed long ago, and it's difficult to sort of regulate because, if you're trying to get a pornography license in South Africa, the regulations around it are very, very strict.
Yeah.
But online, you just have to confirm that you're 18 and then you're in. Obviously that has a lot of impact on how people behave. And I think it reshapes how young people, see themselves. Because some of them compare themselves to the performers. They don't understand that pornography is an act. And then there's certain issues that of consent. They don't understand that there was consent. So those issues of consent also come up. Then there's also unrealistic expectations that, I need to look a certain way. I need to behave a certain way. And that can obviously affect their self-esteem. It can impact their self-worth and their identity, because now they think they need to change themselves to either have muscles, or they need to have big breasts, or they need to sort of change their bodies into a certain way. And also it normalizes aggression. I think, the pornography that we're seeing it's not safe because anyone can now create. And because it's not regulated, it can go very extreme. And I think also it just gives it gives this idea of sexual intimacy that sometimes is very unrealistic, where now you see certain partners feel like they're not satisfied because what they've seen, they can't really emulate it in real life. And because, pornography or addiction affects your brain, because of the dopamine hits, it's like real life intimacy might now feel like, ooh, it's actually it's dull,
Yeah.
But essentially it's because of the pornography that you watched, and now you're expecting that outcome. And that can really, really affect relationships, and it can create resentment. Trust issues, and it can really, really be devastating for families to be able to deal with that. And, if it can affect adults, imagine children who now have to navigate, that kind of life, where they, there's shame, they feel anxious, they want to be isolated because, that sort of addiction, thrives from isolation. You need to be, especially if you're hiding it. It can also affect, your life, where now you just want to see pornography all the time. You're at church, you feel like, oh, maybe if I go to the bathroom a little bit. And I think, it can really, really affect relationships and how they can sort of, it can affect relationships. And I think it can also just affect your self-esteem, and in extreme circumstances, it can lead to suicide, and it can also lead to, people getting separated because now there's trust issues, and you're making somebody feel like, they're not worthy. And it can lead to a lot of things. I think it's one of the most devastating harms that exist. And obviously, there are those issues of infidelity where you want to basically go after what you saw, a specific person who looked a certain way. Yeah.
And how about our pastors,
Sure. I
think getting sermons, we're losing. And I think there was a tweet I saw last week where someone was asking who actually still owns a physical Bible. Because it's really come to that where people can just Google, write me a sermon, and it will give you a sermon, it will give you the verses, it will give you a prayer.
Sure.
What are the harms to the ministry and to young people that are growing in their faith what does it take away from them?
I think it's very dangerous. And I think, as I alluded earlier, AI unfortunately hallucinates. So I think if you're going to rely on AI without doing your research, and I think it's even more difficult if you're not an expert in a field, because you can use AI to sort of shape where you want your sermon to go, but you need to have background. You need to have facts, because otherwise you're going to be leading people astray, and you're going to be leading people from the truth and the way of life. And I think that could be very detrimental, for the people who rely on you, to receive good news and to receive the truth. And I think, it's very lazy, and I think it's detrimental to the church, because, we come to church because we want to be inspired. We want to, leave with knowing the truth. We need to know, about salvation. We need to know about different season. So I think if you're going to cheat your way, you're doing a disservice to the people you are leading. And I think also you're just creating a culture of laziness. And I think, young people who want to sort of, get into that field, I don't think they are able to sort of like critically engage with that content if you can just find it on AI. And I think if that's the direction that's going, why are we then coming to church? Because we could just Google a sermon and just sit at home. So I think it's something that's quite dangerous. I think we obviously need to be discerning, as I mentioned. I think we also need to lead with integrity. It's very important that we lead with integrity, and also we need to have courage. I think if we are able to see certain things like that, we need to be able to call them out. Even if we stand alone, I think Christianity is such a sacred thing. And I think if, ministers and pastors and youth leaders are taking that shortcut, they're doing a disservice for themselves in terms of them serving, and telling people the truth. They're doing a disservice, because how are you growing in terms of your own personal journey if you just want to take a cheap option, or you want to cheat, and you want to take a lazy route? And I think, it doesn't really build in terms of personal development if you are going to go that route without, actually knowing the facts. Because what are you going to do, when it's Judgment Day?
Exactly.
What were you leading my people?
Where's AI there?
Exactly, yeah.
Wow, this has been quite insightful. And I think we've touched on good and bad, and I think I've learned a lot just from this conversation. But as we close off, are there any closing remarks you have for the young people? Just from what we've discussed, we also want to maintain that God's truth is the only truth. That's the only place where you will get the truth. But do you have any closing remarks, any fun facts you want to share, or any wisdom that you want to part and give to the young people watching?
I think, sure, I think there's so much I want to say, but I just want to, I think, social media and even artificial intelligence, they are tools, that we can use for opportunities. But I think we should not forget who we are. I think we should not rely on the validation of other people. I think we still need to understand, that we only need to look to God for validation. We don't need the validation of other people. And if you are, participating on social media, or, you're, there's this term that they've coined of Christian influences, where people are just following blindly without even interrogating, why we're doing certain things. And, I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were talking about how, sometimes people, they want to follow certain challenges, like you want to follow what the influencer is doing. So if the influencer is not fasting, then you're not going to fast. If there's no, specific challenge on, let's read the Bible then you're not reading the Bible. You know, if you constantly need other people, other voices for you to, you know, be spiritual, for you to have time with the Lord, to make time for the Lord, for you to make time to fast, you know, to make time to read the word. If you constantly need a voice or somebody to be leading you, then you need to interrogate, why am I doing it? You know, because unfortunately, sometimes if we follow people blindly, we lose sight of what's important. We lose sight of, you know, the word and what it actually says. And maybe, you know, sometimes when you flip the Bible, I've found myself in situations where like I'm suffering, you know, and you just sometimes open your Bible and you get it there. You get that, oh, okay, you know, but if you don't make time for yourself to connect to God in that way, to connect to prayer, you know, to make time, even in church, to be fully present and to fully, you know, engage with the people you're at, then you're losing out. And I think, you know, it can really, really affect your journey in terms of getting to know God. And also just seeing what God does in your life. Because as I mentioned before, you know, sometimes we are in different seasons, you know, and sometimes you just need to be in a season. If it's your season to rest. If it's your season to harvest. But if it's your season to learn, make the time so that you can be obedient, you know, to God's call, and you can stick to God's words without just following people, just because, you know, Lufuno has X amount of followers and Lufuno says let's fast. Sometimes it's great, but if you aren't able to do that for yourself, where you're like, oh, let me actually take 30 minutes tonight and pray, or let me open my Bible. If you need someone constantly reminding you that, oh, actually pay X amount and let's do this challenge, it can be really problematic. So I think my closing remarks, especially for young people, and I think for parents as well, you know, smartphones, I think we need to delay them in terms of giving our children, because, you know, some of the online harms that exist can really, really affect our children. I think we need to make more time. We need to model the behavior that we want our kids to actually follow. So I think kids will never listen to what you say, but they'll do what you do.
True.
So if you know, behave a certain way in terms of your fellowship with God, your kids will look up to you and they will see, you know, a good example from you. So I think we need to model good behavior, and we need to ensure that we actually spend time, you know, more with our children, and instead of just giving them screens.
Guilty.
So instead of just giving them screens, but we need to have time with them, and be able to actually help them navigate, you know, especially in this digital age. It's difficult for parents. I can acknowledge that, but I think there's still hope. There's still hope. So I think those are my closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Lerato, for all the wisdom that you've shared with us today, for all the tips and the wisdom that you shared with our young people today. And I believe that everyone that's watching has learned something from today. We've learned that the truth is not in your algorithm, in your social media, but the truth is only found in Christ. With that being said, Namraro.
Heavenly Father, full of grace, thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to work with your children, Lord, for us to be able to remind people that you are the way, you are the light. We thank you, Lord, that everything went according to plan. We thank you, Lord. And we hope that as people watch this, they're able to reflect, that they're able to change their behaviors, and that they're able to see themselves, and that they're able to do better. We thank you. We thank you, Lord, for this, and we pray that as we go home, that you will be with us and that you will protect us until we get to our final destinations. Amen.